and now Jet Brown and low season travel. BUZZ.travel, we had a trade show about 3 months ago, and Jet Brown was one of our speakers, and his presentation got a lot of positive remarks afterwards. There are probably three main reasons for these many positive remarks. A, his material is of high interest. B, what he presents, he does in a very entertaining way. And three, which is also very important, the sense that this guy is authentic. He has a mission. It's not about short-term money. He really has a mission. He has a message. Welcome, Judd. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Great to see you, Jan, and thanks a million for indeed having me on the show, and thanks to not only to you, Jan, and Katja, and all of the Buzz team, but of course also thanks to Guangzhou International Travel Fair for having me on this show. So if we could go straight to the slide deck, please. And by the way, I'm also feeling a little bit of pressure after Jan's very kind words there. This is me. My name is Jed Brown. I'm the founder and CEO of Low Season Traveller, and I'm also I have the honour of being the managing director in EMEA for the World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage. So, hao, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're all doing really well, and I hope you're all staying as positive and as healthy as you possibly can. You know, it sucks right now, doesn't it? But we absolutely can get through this. And it's not like we haven't been through, other crises in the past. In the global travel industry, we've seen crises many times over the years. You can see there on your screen, the Icelandic volcano in 2010, of course, dreadful attacks in 9/11, the Asian tsunami 2004, the global financial crisis after the Lehman Brothers collapse in 2007 to 2009. So, we've seen our fair share of crises within the travel industry and indeed globally over the years. But as our world has become more connected than ever before, due to increased travel, it's been a good thing. We have become more connected than ever before. And I guess the downside means that everything affects the global travel industry. And actually, it affects everything else worldwide. It's not just the travel industry. But whenever there's a crisis, no matter where it is in the world, it has a knock-on effect towards the rest of the world, and certainly within the global travel and tourism industry. On the plus side, the global travel industry has proven to be highly resilient over the years. I worked for an organization called Forward Keys. And if you're not familiar with Forward Keys, I would urge all of you to seek them out on forwardkeys.com. But these guys have the world's largest data set of booking trends in terms of the travel industry. And during my time at Forward Keys, we saw whenever there was any kind of a crisis anywhere in the world, the average recovery time was about 3 months. So it was actually relatively short-lived, and we kind of got used to the fact that we are in this resilient industry. So where were we before the whole COVID situation kicked off, if we can remember that far back? Well, the state of the global travel industry was arguably healthy. In 2019, we saw record growth again, 1.5 billion international arrivals, growth in every region of the world. Another booming year, but yeah, 1.5 billion arrivals internationally around the world. Every region was taking more arrivals than the previous year. The United Nations World Tourism Organization and others had been quoted as saying it had been the best ever year for tourism. I guess in terms of numbers, then best, yeah, absolutely, it was the best. Should we be judging things purely by numbers? I guess we'll come on to that later. And what you can see here is, again, this is taken from the United Nations World Tourism Organization, their barometer of tourism. And it just shows that, over the past, 20, 30 years, it's basically been non-stop growth. So our industry has actually got acclimatized and used to consistent growth. You can see that slight dip in 2008, 2009, where there was the global financial crisis. But in the grand scheme of things, it was just that, just a slight blip. Now, this is a really interesting one. So the United Nations World Tourism Organization, they did predictions with all of their experts as to what we're looking like, what tourism and travel will be looking like by 2030. And they predicted that there'll be 1.8 billion international tourist arrivals. So huge growth, as you can see on the chart. And that was going to be 300 million more than in 2019. And this is the part that started to get me concerned, and it also got Chris Flynn, who's the chairman and founder of the World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage, who I also work with, is that the 1.5 billion mark was forecast to be hit in 2024, and we hit that in 2019, and that's quite a worrying trend. Next slide. And here you can see, again, just pretty much in a slightly different way what we were showing on that last slide, is just where the tourism arrivals were headed towards in 2030. You can see the line going up there, up to 2025 is where we should have been at this particular point. So we expected to see 2 billion before 2030, and we were plus 300 million on our predictions. So really, without a doubt, tourism was growing literally out of control in every single way. And that led to situations like this, which was in Venice, which just frankly looks abhorrent, especially when we talk about social distancing restrictions at the moment. It led to scenes like this in beach resorts around the world. Scenes like this is in Reykjavik in Iceland. And scenes like this is Santorini in Greece. And you just can't help thinking, what's it like to live in Santorini? If that's your home and that's where your family home is, what's it like having all of these tourists in your back garden, effectively, all of the time throughout those key summer months? So we saw constant and consistent annual growth, and really it made us lazy. We realized that we just need to open up for our peak seasons, and we're pretty much guaranteed to get more tourists, more business than we did in the previous year. So life was easy, life was good. We didn't need to try too hard. It was just always going to come because tourism just goes one way. It just keeps going up. So really we took our eye off the ball. And when we took our eye off the ball, this is what was happening while we were taking our eye off the ball. We started to see increased pressure on historical sites. So this, for many of you, I'm sure are familiar with this, is Angkor Wat in Cambodia, thronged with tourists. Impossible to get a picture without tourists in it, actually. And again, with all of these photos, you wonder, what's the experience like for the people that are there? Is that the experience that they signed up to? I'm guessing it probably wasn't. We found that it negatively impacted the visitor experience. And on this one, we talk about destination management and in times mismanagement. But this is obviously the Louvre in Paris. And what you can see in the distance, I don't know if you can see it on your screens, but the Mona Lisa picture, if you haven't seen it, it is actually quite small. And it's right there in the very far distance, with everybody straining to get a photograph of it. So are the tourism flows in the Louvre, have they been well managed? Arguably not, let alone Paris, by the way. And then we started to see this, and this is really, really troubling. We started to see cultural, historical artifacts, in this case over 7,000 years old in Egypt, starting to be defaced. And that's a real worry. We started to see more incidences like this. The headline: a British woman arrested for stealing mosaic tiles from Pompeii. That's really concerning, because again, if every tourist that visited Pompeii removed a tile or a couple of tiles, there'd be nothing left in next to no time. So that's a real worry. Cultural heritage being eroded away. And as Chris Flynn, the chairman of WETAC, is always saying, cultural heritage, it can't be grown. You can't just sort of develop some new cultural heritage. It's been there for hundreds and sometimes thousands of years. And we have a duty to protect and preserve it. And this is really troubling. And then we have, situations like this, and this is where it shows that it's truly a global phenomenon that we're going through. And these statues that you can see the outline of are the famous Maui statues in Easter Island, also known as Rapa Nui. Now, Rapa Nui, Easter Island in the Pacific there, it has a population of 5,700 people. Yet, in 2019, it saw annual visitors of over 100,000. 100,000 annual visitors. It used to have 2 flights a week into Rapa Nui, and in 2019, it had 3 a day. Now, think of the challenges there, because in Rapa Nui, when you've got a population of 5,700, everything in that society is geared up and prepared for a population of 5,700, whether that's the road infrastructure, whether it's the restaurants, the eateries, the shops, the roads, the taxis, you name it, it's geared up for a population of 5,700. What does it do to a destination when all of a sudden your population, albeit a temporary population, is increased by a multiple of 20? I mean, that's just unbelievable. Well, I'll show you what the effect is. The effect is this. What you're looking at here is the result, which was that Rapa Nui in 2019 was producing 20,000 tons of garbage every single day, a problem they had never had to deal with before. They were completely unprepared for it. And what that led to is the logistical challenge of disposing of 20 tons of garbage, which actually had to be flown every day, 5,000 kilometers to the Chile mainland for disposal. That's truly horrific. And that's the situation that we were seeing in just one of the destinations. Actually, it happens in many destinations, the similar picture. We started to see growth management issues where people feel that it's completely acceptable to climb all over these artifacts which are thousands of years old, utterly horrific, just so that they can get that Instagram picture or selfie. We started to see growing social problems. So as there are more tourists and they're impacting on the lives of the local communities, those local communities are starting to revolt against it, with signs like this one in Barcelona. Tourists go home, and there's many more pictures like this that you can see, again, not just in Barcelona, but all around the world. We started to see more of an overpopulation, more crowded cities. And this really does lead on to the fact that we need to view tourists as temporary residents, but huge problems. So over-tourism is a result of tourism mismanagement. Too many tourists in the same place at the same time. And in the recent months, people have been remarking, and I've seen it on social media and actually mainstream media, people saying that over-tourism is no longer a risk because of COVID and because travel has practically stopped. Over-tourism is no issue anymore. Let me tell you, that's a really, really dangerous supposition. Because actually, when we talk about the new world that we're in at the moment with the COVID situation, and we know it's going to be far-reaching and long-reaching into the future, what that means is that the capacity that we had in our hotels and destinations, now that we understand that we have to have some element of social distancing, and it will go well into the future, the capacity in each of those destinations is significantly less than it ever was pre-COVID. And that means there's an even greater risk of having over-tourism circumstances actually at a lower level than you did in 2019 and 2018. So actually, over-tourism is a huge concern, even more so in the days post-COVID and 2020 and 2021. And that's something we need to really watch out for. This is a slide which I show, quite often when I'm doing these talks. It's from the United Nations World Tourism Organization, their barometer, and it shows their highlights as to why tourism is important, and all of these things which tourism brings. And it absolutely does. It brings cultural preservation, 1 in 10 jobs worldwide, 10% of the world's GDP. These are real, tangible benefits of the global travel industry. And yet I'm always more interested in what we call the softer ones on these, which is global peace and security, which I will come on to later. Environmental protection. Tourism is essential for environmental protection, and the same with cultural preservation as well. And this is another slide that I've used previously. It's called the Goldilocks Paradox. And for any of you out there who aren't familiar, there's a story that we read to our children, and indeed I always read it when I was a little boy, about Goldilocks and the three bears. And this girl is trying porridge, and one is too hot, one is too cold, but one is just right. And the Goldilocks Paradox is really when we relate this to travel and tourism, and the effect that it has on communities and culture. We now know what too few looks like. We've seen in the past the devastating effect that too many has had. So the question then comes, well, what does just right look like? How many tourists is just right? Not per year, but at any given time. How many tourists is your destination geared up to receiving at any one time in such a way that the economy thrives, but the community, environment, and culture isn't negatively affected? I've spoken to ministers, CEOs, and more, and no one has told me what the capacity for their destination is. They talk about available bed nights, they talk about what the roads capacity is, the taxis, the public transport. That's the stuff that we need to know. And we need to get a handle on this. Otherwise, we're going to see huge cases of over-tourism again in the future. So we need to avoid these pressure points. So over-tourism is an issue of peak pressure points. And for this, you have to look at the spread of tourism throughout the year, the seasonality curve. When do most visitors arrive? And this is a pretty typical one that's on your screen just now. So I've just done this. This is just an example. I've based it on 27,000 visitors over the course of the year. You can see the months along the bottom. And this would be a pretty common seasonality curve for a destination, where you see about 75% of all arrivals coming in a 6-month period, the peak period, and 25% are in the remaining 6 months. And where it's interesting is, look, you can look at the sides of this. Hopefully you can see my cursor, and you can sort of think, look, we've got more capacity here, and we've got more capacity here, and maybe we've got too much there. So it's about flattening the curve. Let's see what it looks like with the same number of visitors, but more evenly spread. And that's what a different seasonality curve can look like, where it's a lot more evenly spread. Still a slight peak in certain months, but broadly speaking, it's a little bit more even. Now, if your seasonal spread is like this, again, you've got to think, are there any pressure points? If there aren't, you can accommodate more tourism. This particular curve, it could be Venice, which has suffered from over-tourism, or it could equally be Myanmar, which has under-tourism. But it's about trying to flatten the seasonality curve, which is actually crucial if we're going to welcome more tourists to our destinations. And you have choices when it comes to flattening the curve. These are the choices which are open to us. Increasing prices to deter some visitors. So if you increase prices in those peak months, it'll put some people off, and then therefore you'll have fewer visitors then. You can develop more or new destinations and resorts. Little bit of a concerning one, that one, because presumably you'd be developing new hotels, new resorts, new destinations, only for those hotels to be about 25% occupied for 6 months of the year. Doesn't feel sustainable, doesn't feel responsible, doesn't feel like it's the right thing to do. And of course, the third option, which is glaringly obvious, which is encourage and promote tourism during the quieter weeks and months of the year. And it has to, the question has to be asked, why have we never tried to do this before? Because as an industry, we've never really proactively made a concerted and joined up effort to promote our low season months in all destinations around the world. Why? Well, I suppose it's the great unknown. It's filled with fear. People want to understand what's it like then. It's not the right time to go. It's not the best time to go. So people are scared, and we're scared to sell it because we're not convinced. We don't have the confidence in our destinations, which, we really should, because actually adventure and discovery, these are the things which actually are found in the low season months. But be under no illusion, we as an industry are responsible for this seasonality issue. As travel agents, as I once was myself, and tour operators, we were solicited for advice, and we informed people when was the best time to visit. And I've traveled the world over during the low seasons, and I can tell you the experience is utterly wonderful. But what I do see is a lack of confidence that our low season product is strong enough. It's as if we don't really see the value in it ourselves. and it's our home, you know, in many cases. Why don't we see the value ourselves? It beggars belief. But, you know, for those seeking something authentic, different, adventurous, excitement, cultural heritage, weather is not a crucial factor. And many are craving these things, and we need to target them more accurately. Cultural heritage, both tangible cultural heritage in the buildings and intangible through, you know, music and the arts, it's available all year round. And cultural heritage travelers are low season travelers. So what's the difference between a cultural trip in the summer and the same trip in the winter, assuming that the winter is the low season? This is an example which I did last year. I took 2 identical itineraries, one in December, one in July for Rome, and this one was from London. And, you know, it's exactly the same in both cases. Flights with Ryanair in this particular case, 3 nights in a 5-star hotel, transfers to and from the airport, a tour included. One is £546 per person, and the other is £264 per person. So, you know, there's a huge price differential. But also, you know, in the summer, you're going to queue up to 3 hours to see attractions like the Colosseum. You're paying twice the price, as we saw in the last slide. Service levels are likely to be poorer due to the fact that there's larger crowds. The locals are unlikely to have time to interact with you. In the winter, however, there are no queues, half the price, service levels are good, more chance for local interaction because there are less tourists, they have more time to interact with you. All the sites are still there that you want to see and explore, but you might need to bring a jacket. So which option do you want to go for? Which looks more appealing to you? I know which one looks more appealing to me. So why aren't we promoting it in this way? If you had a business which had 70% reliance on one product or income stream, it would be utterly crazy if you A, didn't monitor and manage it incredibly carefully, and B, if you didn't make serious efforts to reduce the overall reliance on that single product line. And that's a really big challenge, I think. And that's that sort of, you know, when we saw on the previous slides, we've become lax. And we just kind of accepted that the peak seasons is where we do our business. It gets higher every year. And then you have a real problem when you have a large crisis. You could lose your business. And this is what happened in 2020. For the first time ever, we had a large crisis which was unlike any other previous crisis in terms of its longevity. It wasn't going to be one which we were going to recover from in 3 months. So then what happens? And that's the big challenge which is affecting a lot of destinations around the world now. Their single biggest product line was catering to peak season clients. And in this case, the summer was their biggest, if not their only opportunity for tourism revenue. And now we know what happens when something comes along and decimates that cash cap. Well, you know, crisis is literally just another word for opportunity. We are starting again. It's a new beginning. And the time to flatten our seasonality curve has frankly never been better. So that's the good news. Let's be optimistic here. Now is the time. These are the travel trends as identified by Forbes, CN Traveler, National Geographic, and many others. Travelers are craving real experiences more and more. We're also going to want to travel without the crowds increasingly. But all of these things that travelers are looking for, and it's come out in many different studies, slow travel, cultural heritage, adventure, authentic travel, responsible travel, sustainable travel, ethical travel, they're all there during the low season months. And also it's a time when you can travel without the crowds, which again is more of what people are looking for, especially today. So, you know, overall, these are some of the key points here. We can't and mustn't go back down the path we were on. We know where that leads us. We have a golden opportunity to proactively promote our low seasons and thus create a sustainable year-round offering. We just need to have the courage to target the growing number of travelers who fit the low season and cultural heritage travel profile. You know, really, we need to be leaders here. Many say that people don't want to travel during the low seasons. And I actually don't believe that they know what low season travel is like. So we have a responsibility in the travel industry to educate them. And we need to educate ourselves as well. And, you know, I always want to say at this note, I love this quote from Henry Ford, the famous automobile manufacturer from the States, which said, if, you know, he famously said, if I'd have asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. But he provided them with the car. People don't always know what they want. We need to lead them, and we need to solve their problems and show them, actually, this is the way in which you should be doing things. So I've got to add a note of caution. This is a really big point for me. Travel has brought us closer together in the past 50 years. As we've seen more air travel, we've traveled more around the world, and we are all more joined up, and we're closer than we ever were, which has been utterly wonderful. We've got a greater understanding of different countries, cultures, and peoples. I've traveled personally to China many times, and prior to traveling to China, I had certain preconceived ideas of China and the Chinese. Having visited China many times, I'm utterly won over by what a wonderful, wonderful culture and destination China is. It's no accident that we've seen a huge amount more peace during this time. We've seen fewer wars, and I don't think that's an accident. I think we're all getting used to traveling, understanding different cultures, and once you understand different cultures and you've literally broken bread and had meals and shared meals in that local culture, very hard to, you know, to hate against a culture that you truly understand. So we've become a global community, and we need to keep thinking globally, looking outwards rather than being insular and always just looking at our own place. We've got to keep looking outwards, because if we were to stop traveling, I believe that this could be the single biggest risk to global peace and harmony that the world has ever seen. And that's my big fear at the moment, actually. As we're not traveling at the moment, I'm starting to see elements of different countries and peoples starting to go more insular and more in on themselves. And that's a real threat, actually, I believe, for all of us around the world. So the message is, you know, keep traveling, keep exploring, keep discovering, keep caring, and absolutely keep dreaming. It's still a beautiful, wonderful, and awe-inspiring world out there. We've just got a responsibility to protect and preserve it. And that means that we're going to need to start to think differently. And it is indeed our obligation to future generations. So we need to change the way we think. And as we rebuild our travel industry out of this current crisis, we need to honor and learn from our ancestors, like the European cathedral builders. You know, cathedral thinking, if you're not familiar with the concept, was where years ago, and I'll give you the example which was taught to me, years ago in southern England, the cathedral builders would build these beautiful monuments like you can see on the screen now. And it would take, you know, it would take them 200 years plus to build these things. And yet, when whoever was the architect for these particular buildings, they knew when they were creating the plans that they would never see the end result. Yet they had to get the plans exactly right so there would be no problems for future generations down the line. They also knew that they would never see the finished article. They weren't doing it for themselves, they were building it for future generations. And then the people who dug the foundations similarly had to get it perfect. They had to do a perfect job, knowing that they were never going to see the end result. They were never going to see the beautiful piece, but they wanted to be a part of it, and they wanted to create it for future generations. And so it went on for every element of the building process for the cathedrals. In one cathedral in the south of England, I believe it was in Cambridgeshire, it might even be this very cathedral that you can see on the screen in front of you. In the 60s, they realized that the oak beams that they had, these huge, colossal oak beams, were starting to rot. They had woodworm, and they were really panicked because they had no idea how they were going to replace these huge oak beams that had been in place for 500-600 years. So they were at a bit of a quandary, and they went to the local community and they were asking everywhere, look, what can we do? Where can we source these beams? And also, how much would it cost to be able to source these beams? And somebody in the community, a local farmer, put his hand up and he said, "My family have been waiting generations for this day." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, the original architects, when they were designing the cathedral, they understood that there was going to be these huge beams and that they would need replacing in 500 or 600 years. So what they did at the time when they were building the cathedral, they planted a huge oak forest on my land, which would always be used should the day come when the beams would need replacing in 500 or 600 years. There will be these huge oaks which will be absolutely ready at the right time to replace those oak beams." That's the epitome of cathedral thinking. It's about building something which we will never see the benefit of during our lifetime. It's about building something for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. And right now, today, in the travel industry, we get to choose what our legacy is going to be for the future. So we are indeed at decision time. It's a critical junction for the global travel industry. And this photo, I love it. It reminds me of a poem by a guy called Robert Frost called The Road Not Taken. And it's about deciding which road you want to go down. Do you want to go down the road which you were already headed down and the one that's well worn, or do you want to cut a new path? A little bit more risky, but actually the one less traveled by is usually the one which is going to make the difference. So the big question for all of you and me, and what we all need to be asking is, are we going to be a part of the problem, or are we going to be a part of the solution? Future generations absolutely will judge us on this. That's it. That's all I have for you. If you'd like to find out more about the work that the World Tourism Association for Cultural Heritage and Low Season Traveller are doing, you can see all of the different links on there. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you'd like to contact me directly, obviously you can do it through the BUZZ.travel platform, naturally, but also you can reach out to me directly on jed@lowseasontraveller.com. Thank you all very much for your attention. I really appreciate it.
Very important points for the time when China outbound come back full speed, full steam. Jed will be around for the next couple of days. I would highly recommend that you reach out to him. China outbound and the points of inventing, of creating a new kind of travel are things which are very much recommended to dig into, and reach out to Jed. He will be around. Jed, as usual, a great pleasure listening to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jan. I appreciate it.
Thank you.